Do you know when a crack is a bad crack? Do you know when damp at the bottom of a room is different to damp at the top of a room? And if you don't know that, and like most people, and certainly like me when I started investing in property, unless you're actually in the trades, you won't know that sort of detail of a property. How are you going to work out when you're looking to invest in a house what the costs are before you can get that property fit and decent to rent to somebody? Where are you going to gain that knowledge? Yes, all right, you can bring a builder around, and the builder's going to give you a price, and maybe you'll bring 2 or 3 builders around and they're going to give you a price, and you might guess that maybe the one in the middle is a better price to pick, but you won't have learned about the issues. And there is a danger that if you then speak to a builder, unless you've already got a very good relationship with them, or I don't know, actually, I was going to say unless they're a family member, although I have got stories of people being conned by their own family members. Will you learn so that you can improve your knowledge next time? And if you're going to see 5 properties and you want to pick one of those 5 properties to invest in, you can't expect a builder to give an entire day to view 5 properties on which you might bid on one, and you may or may not get to buy that property, and he may or may not get any work out of it. So what I did was I employed a surveyor. And I'm going to explain to you next week the difference between surveyors and valuers. And I'm going to use those 2 words very specifically here. Why is it important that you know when a crack is a bad crack? So this is a Wealthy Life podcast. My name is Vicky Wauchet, and the purpose of this podcast is to help you leverage your money into property investment in a way that saves you time so that your money works harder and you don't have to. And this is part of a little series of videos here about understanding who your team is, understanding the systems. This bit is around understanding how you can gain more knowledge. And then next week, we're going to do a bit of, if you like, jargon, the difference between surveyor and valuer, etc. So what I want to cover off in this one is, when is a crack a bad crack, and how can you learn the difference? And it's a little bit of my own journey again. What did I do? I was visiting up north, looking at properties all the time. I'm very lucky that my husband is the electrician, the brother-in-law is the plumbing. They've both been on site. They've done the trades. They know a bit about properties, but that didn't help me when I was up there on my own. I would have to take photographs and then show them a picture of something and go, what does this mean? So I needed to get some knowledge. Now, the other reason I did this, and I'm going to switch words, is valuations. So sometimes when you've found a property and you've worked it out and you think you know what it's worth to you, and that's what you're going to put your offer in, and you've done your calculations, that figure needs to include covering off the cost of the works that you're going to have to do to bring that property up to speed. So you're going to need to know what works you need to be doing and what the cost of those works might be. And then what you're going to have to do is put all of that into your spreadsheet and work out a purchase price. If you get that wrong and you're going to buy using a mortgage, when the mortgage valuer comes round to value the property, and they then decide to value the property differently than you have, let's say it's on the market for 110 and you're going to offer 100 and they value it for 90, that means your loan will be 75% of the 90 valuation rather than 75% of the £100,000 offer that you've put in. And so you're going to end up short. The gap between the loan that you receive and the deposit that you thought you had, there will be a gap, and you're going to have to fill that. And if you don't then have spare money, or you don't have accounted for that already, you can find yourself in a problem that you then don't have the money to refurbish the property. So it's really important to pick up on problems like damp, cracks, and pests, and damp rot, and dry rot, and wet rot, and every other sort of issue that can come along with a property. Even understanding about double glazing, boilers, and your electrics. So I wanted to make sure that I was in a position where, to the best of my ability, I could judge not only the value of the property in the way that the valuer does, and I'll explain that next week, but also assess the cost of works in the way that maybe a builder might, although I'm not claiming that I've got the same sort of experience as a builder, but I want to be able to go in and pick up on things so that I can put in the best possible offer. How was I going to get that knowledge? I'd done all these years of property training and they talked to me about different strategies. And quite frankly, I could have got that from a book. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. How was I going to do a construction degree, really? That's what I'm looking for. So this is where I'm going to switch words again. A surveyor. I decided that I would employ a surveyor. What do I mean by that, employ a surveyor? Well, I contacted a couple of local surveying companies. So they are RICS, RICS, that's the abbreviations, the Royal Institute for Chartered Surveyors in the UK. You'll have surveyors in other countries. And they are qualified to survey a property at a much deeper level than somebody who's just going to give a valuation. A valuation is, I've looked at the inside, I've looked at the outside, I looked at what's being sold on the street, and this is my valuation. A surveyor is actually looking into greater detail here. So what I wanted to do was see if I could get inside their minds. So I phoned them, I asked them the question, how much do you charge for a survey? And how long does that survey take? So they told me 2 hours. Awesome. My next question was, can I go with the surveyor while he surveys the property, or she surveys the property? I had a man and a woman from 2 different companies. Can I go with them when they go around the property? And what I want them to do is to speak out loud their survey report to me. But in return, I don't need them to write up the report. I don't want a written report at all. Not interested in a written report. I want them to talk to me and I want to be able to ask them questions instead. So if they say as they're walking around the room, oh, I have noted damp in the corner of bedroom 1, I then want them to say to me what that sort of damp is, or I have noticed a crack in the wall of bedroom 2. I want them to explain the cause of the crack. They agreed that that would be our arrangement. I then identified 5 properties. And as I mentioned last week, I was in a very fortunate space at the time where I was just given the keys. So I literally had these 5 keys all day. And in the morning, what I did, because I also wanted to buy one of these properties, so I was making sure that I had value for me as well as learning for me and everything else. So set up 5 properties, hoped that I would find one that I was going to buy. I then set up a surveyor in the morning to survey 3 properties. I then set up a surveyor in the afternoon to survey 3 properties, and both of them surveyed one of the properties twice. So there were 5 properties, but 6 valuations, 2 of them on the same house. Because what I thought is I could then compare 2 different styles, because if I just had one surveyor, who's to know if that was the best way, and who to know if that was the way that would suit me? Because what I wanted to do was create my own initial property inspection routine based on what a surveyor / valuer might do at some point in the future. So I wanted to learn their process and then adapt it to my purposes, while also getting a fast track construction, not really degree, but qualification from these people where they imparted their knowledge to me. Absolutely the best money that I spent. And I think really in hindsight, if you could read a book and then just sit down with a mentor of each of these specialities, that would do you so much good. However, let's go on from there. So what I learned is how to walk in the property, that there is a pathway that you take. So you take a routine and you work your way around the building so that you don't miss anything, that you'll have your crib sheet, however you do it. Now it's online. There'll be things that you can have on your iPad or whatever, and that you have a set number of things that you observe in a room as a routine. Yes, if you like, you're looking for exceptions. Is there a radiator? Yes. Oh, great. There must be a boiler. Because if there isn't a radiator, then it makes you wonder whether they've got gas central heating. That might sound a little unusual to you, because we're also used to having heating, but some properties, either there is gas in the street and there just isn't gas to this building, or there's no gas in the street, or there's gas in the street and there's gas to the building, but maybe they've only heated the bedrooms upstairs, and downstairs they might not use radiators. They might have used an actual open fire. So thinking about how other people and the age of buildings and the way they're used, you can actually start to find exceptions. You might even find properties these days that still don't have modern double glazing, or they might have double glazing, but it could be 30 or 40 years old. Do you know how to look for the dates inside the double glazing? Do you check double glazing when you go in the properties? Do you know that double glazing doesn't always need to be replaced? It can be refurbished if it's good quality. So understanding what to look for, and then we get to the exciting stuff like damp. When is damp bad damp? It's damp, is it condensation, so it's warm air on a cold wall, or is it actually that there is a breach in something called the damp proof course? Now this will only happen on the ground floor, and it means that the membrane or the barrier between dirt, which can be wet at the bottom, and the bricks above, which can osmosis up the water, draw up the water and make the inside of the building damp, that there's been a problem with that barrier. And if that's the case, then you're looking at a more expensive and more lengthy job of chipping off the plaster, putting in injection damp proof course all the way around, replastering, allowing that the time to dry, as opposed to you might get a bit of damp upstairs in a bedroom where you find that you've got a blocked or a leaky gutter, which is a relatively easy and quick job to deal with. And that makes a difference to understanding the costs of a property. I think that whenever anybody talks to you about the yield, they're talking to you in such gross, broad numbers that it's meaningless. What they're saying is that this house is worth this amount of money, gross, just the purchase price, never mind any sort of taxes that you have to pay, solicitors fees, survey fees, none of that, never mind any repairs that are required to that property. And then this is the gross income that you're going to get for it, the rent times 12, or the monthly rent times 12. That tells me nothing really in the property. If I already know my area, okay, so what? That's just going to be what nearly all the properties around here are. What really matters is the net figures, the return on investment. And those are the numbers that I work with my clients. So understanding that it's not just what you pay for the property, it's how much it costs you to get it up to standard. Because it's not that you bought it for 100,000, it's you bought it for 100,000 and then you spent £7,000 to do it up. That means that property cost you 107. Didn't cost you 100, cost you 107. And it's got to be worth 107 or more to make it even worthwhile buying it, because otherwise you're overdeveloping, over refurbing, overpaying for a property. So understanding how, and I'll go back to using these words again, a valuer will value a property, even though they won't go into the same detail as a surveyor will, they will pick up whether there are works needed. They won't necessarily explain to you what the works are. They may even suggest to you that you have other trades and other specialties in to check up on that work. So they might say, for example, there's a damp problem, you'll need someone to do a damp report, but they won't do that for you, whereas the surveyor would be the person who might come in and do that. So a valuer is going to value that property, and if you don't get those valuation figures right at the beginning, you can find yourself in a cash flowing issue. An example here, we went to sell a couple of properties via auction because we knew that they needed work, but also I was just testing out the market, and everything takes so long to get through the buying process. One of the things with an auction is that you can actually be in the position where you can put it on the market, get an offer, and that person has to complete within 28 days. So the surveyor and the solicitor and everybody involved knows the timetable they're working to. If you buy on the open market, we've got a property going through at the moment, and I think we're into our 5th month, still waiting for all the paperwork to be completed. So the idea of selling these properties through an auction was going to give us that, yes, they're going to go quick, great. And if they do, they do. And if they don't, they don't. Wonderful news. but the person who bought them never viewed them. They had been on a course, and the course had said that if you buy a property in the Northwest, what you can do is do it up for X amount of money. You can revalue it, and it's going to be worth 30, 40,000 pounds more. Not really. You're talking about buying a property at 100,000 and then doing maybe 10, 15, 20,000 pounds worth of work and expecting a valuer to come back and value it at 150 when the market isn't going that crazy and they know how much you paid to do it. Why? And this is what I'm talking to you about, the difference about the value of the work and the costs of the works and the value of the property. If a property is worth 100,000 pounds and you spend 20,000 pounds doing that work up, the property will be worth 120,000. You hope. If you've overpaid, then actually the property is worth 90,000 and you've done 20,000 pounds worth of work, then the property is only worth 110,000. You cannot take a property in a flat market or even a mild market, climbing market, and suddenly decide that you're going to ignore the average property inflation in an area, which, let's say, make the maths nice, say there was 10% inflation. You bought a property at 100,000, you do 20,000 pounds worth of work, the property is worth 120,000. You could maybe, if you were really lucky, add 10 grand-ish to that. So it would be worth maybe 130. You're not going to get a value at 140. Why would you? And so this person didn't buy just one property, they bought two. Spookily, given that nobody knows what's going on, they bought both of our properties and then spent the next months beside themselves because, one, they had bought using bridging finance, which means they weren't taking on a mortgage because they probably couldn't get the mortgage done in time and they probably didn't have the cash themselves. So they bought using a bridging finance route, which is very, very expensive money. They then were thinking that they were going to do a quick refurb, when in actual fact, the properties, in order to get the maximum value, probably needed new roofs. I wouldn't have done the roofs yet. Neither of the roofs were leaking, but in the long run, the roofs were going to need repair, but they certainly needed new bathrooms and new kitchens. If you got them empty, do the work now, new bathroom, new kitchen, new flooring, get going from there. Great. But the guy didn't have the money for this. And then at the end of it, when he then spoke to the letting agent, he wasn't going to get the rental values he'd been told. He wasn't going to get the valuation he'd been told. And he was in tears because now, without that valuation, how was he going to remortgage or mortgage the property after the works, pull the money back out in order to pay back the bridging finance, which would have been killing him in terms of the interest rate. And I'm talking about an average of 10 to 15% on the money that he had borrowed, which is a lot of money to be in debt. And that's why understanding the construction of the property and therefore understanding the cost of the repairs of the property is so crucial before you even put in that first offer. And that's certainly one of the things that I have learned and been able to do for my clients. And it's been absolutely invaluable. So I spoke to you last week about the team. I also said to you, I spoke to you 2 weeks ago about the team, and I spoke to you last week about systems, and I offered you both access to the online course, but also to one of my spreadsheets over the last couple of weeks. What I would say to you now is, if you do not have trade experience and you're thinking about setting off and doing this on your own, make sure you get an understanding of some of the most common, most expensive problems with a property so that you can differentiate. If not, work with someone who you know visits the property and make sure that they give you these figures up front. My name's Vicky Wooshea. I hope that I have put some more whoosh into your life. This has been a Wealthy Life podcast. Thank you very much for listening. Do go back and listen to the last 2 weeks. So the previous week was about how you'll fail without your team. And I spoke to you about how important it was to have your team. And then also how you could go away and leave your portfolio, so understanding the systems, because there were great opportunities for you to enhance your property knowledge, either through the course, through the books, or through the spreadsheets that I spoke about there. And next week, we're going to pick up on what you don't know about property part 2, which is where I'm going to go into that language of surveyor versus valuer, and we'll speak about that a bit more. Until then, please do rate, review, subscribe, and I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for listening.